All right, recording in progress. Welcome. My name is Jay Feigl, and I've got a couple of guests with me today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Let's go to you first, Daniel. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Daniel Clauston. I am 44 years old. I live in São Paulo, Brazil. I've lived around the world, Europe, Central America, and South America. Did most of my high school in upstate New York, and I'm also a teacher.
Great. And Diego, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Diego. I am 40 years old. I currently live in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been here for about 6 years. Um, I've been back and forth to Brazil and the States for a while now. This is my probably third, fourth time back. And work as a teacher. Um, uh, yeah, so looking forward to talking to you guys about this
All right,
stuff.
great. Yeah, we have a topic of discussion tonight, and the topic is um, language acquisitions, specifically English. And a lot of people probably wouldn't realize it when they talk to you, but you guys learned English as a second language. And so, could you tell me where are you from? Tell me a little bit about your origins and that background, Daniel.
So I was born into a very poor neighborhood where education wasn't the priority for us at that time. At a very young age, I moved around a lot. I ended up at orphanages where I had a little bit of time in school, um, but it wasn't sufficient as I moved into New York a little bit later and fell a little bit behind because of the language. So more or less my language trajectory, right?
Yeah, and we're gonna get into that more in detail. Thank you for that. Diego, yourself, please.
Well, if you haven't noticed, that's my big brother right there. Um, we've been through it. The stories are going to be very similar, but there's a lot of differences. In terms of language, I've had to, again, we're going to get into it later, but a lot of interesting stories. Looking forward to the talk. Yeah, let's go. Let's do this.
Excellent. So I'm gonna jump ahead. So you guys are both from São Paulo, Brazil. I want to ask you about your first encounters or first experiences with English. And I assume it probably happened in Brazil, but maybe I'm wrong. What contact, if any, or what experience, if any, uh, did you have with English in Brazil before moving to New York in the U.S.?
So we know that in Brazil, people they listen to English all the time. Depending on the class, the 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 social classes, you have been exposed since you were very, very, very young. You probably would hear as a young child. But where we come from, people are very exposed through radio, TVs, anything like that. Nowadays, you have internet, but when I was young, I remember very clearly listening to music and really get the toning out of it, really get exposed to the sound of music. But differently when you get to the vocabulary of music.
Sure.
And those are like it might sound strange, but those are like the initial exposure, but you really don't really pay a lot of attention to language in terms of, oh, this is English, it sounds so, great. No, you just listen, you hear the sound, and you try to imitate those sounds, sounding like, oh, blah, 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 blah. You really don't care what they really say. You just have the joy of listening and taking care of those sounds. Michael Jackson, for example, was a big one, right? We could hear Michael Jackson, but it was very difficult to understand the language of what he tried to say, and we really didn't care. It just sounded very good to our ears.
Hmm. Diego, what
One of
what
my
experience did you have with English in Brazil?
okay. One of my first experiences. with the English language. I remember me and the big man over there at an orphanage, and there would be, I think there would be a teacher that would come by to teach us some English. And I remember being called up to the office and be like, hey, your teacher is here. And then they would teach us some words, they would teach us some things to preparing us, I guess. I didn't understand much of it at all, but I did remember that was one of my first experiences with the English language. Obviously, as Daniel has mentioned, it it's within our culture, within the Brazilian culture. So you're exposed to different words, different sounds, different musics, movies, and things like that. So I think that helps a lot. Um, and I have other stories. I have other stories of when, if you want me to share about
Sure,
when
please.
sure. And I remember when I was about 10 years old. It was my first birthday in the United States,
Mm.
and we were all. It was my first birthday. It was probably the only birthday I can remember. And my adopted mother in New York. That's where we went to. Uh, she brings out the cake, and the cake has the candles. There's presents and stuff all over the place, and and we couldn't communicate. She didn't speak Portuguese, we didn't speak English, but we had to try to figure a way to understand each other. And the word that we were trying to understand, that she was trying to get us to say, was wish, a birthday wish, because you
I
make a
remember
birthday
that.
wish whenever you blow out the candle. So
Yeah.
I remember the big guy over there with a dictionary, and we were looking up the dictionary trying to figure out what birthday wish. And I think there was a
Yeah.
video of it somewhere, and we were just confused. We just didn't know. And then I think we finally understood what it was, and I made a birthday wish. And one of the few presents that I remember now was I got a baseball glove, a very,
Nice.
very American. So that and
What
many other stories that I can recap about learning the English language, you know?
and you kind of are bringing me to the next point I wanted to get to. So you guys had some context, excuse me, some contact and some cultural awareness of American culture or English speaking culture before coming to the US. You mentioned that you had your first birthday in the US in New
Yeah.
York, upstate New York, at 10 years old. So you arrived in the US at 9 years old. Daniel, I think you arrived at 13 years old then, right? Okay. So this question is to both of you guys again. When you arrived in upstate New York at age 13 for Daniel and age 9 for Diego, what were your first impressions of the English language as you were interacting with it as best you could uh, in upstate New York? And of course, this is the thing that I think a lot of students sometimes in more distant countries that don't have as much cultural awareness of some English speaking countries is the culture that's associated with language, right? This is the thing I think Daniel and I have talked about before is I don't know that you can separate language from culture, but sometimes when we're teaching it and we're learning it, it is separated from culture a little bit. So I want to know what were your first impressions of the language and first impressions of the culture, but kind of as distinct entities.
So we have to put into context here where the environment that we were in, because right away I was a bit older and my brother was a little bit young, but we didn't speak any English at all. I mean, we took this lesson with this guy. He taught us how to say bathroom, but I mean, it really didn't make any sense when you're learning something that they try to prepare you to go to the States and say, okay, you have within a month, you're going to be in the States. And we really didn't take any consideration into it. So that really didn't count at all. Once we got into the hotel with her mother, with our adopted mother, she started really enforcing us to say, okay, here's the bathroom. And she would go there and say, bathroom. Here's the kitchen, kitchen. If you want water, this is water. And she would pick up and say water here. And go to she rarely went through the dictionary, a translation dictionary, to trying to find something. She would say, this is your bed, it is your bed. Huh? So she would really provoke us that way to try to get us to understand. If you say, if you need something, ask, like, go to the bathroom. Can I go to the bathroom? You know, or bathroom is here. And you would pick up on these vocabulary words. The same thing happened when you went there. So for us, I wouldn't say we got used to it. We stayed here for like 2 months, but when we got there, it was very easily, her conduct really carries me to this day to say, okay, he doesn't speak any English, but I need to make sure that he understands the basics. So she started with the very, very basic things. Now, differently than most people, we were put in the situation that we needed to go to school because we were already old enough. And I was put into a school where no one spoke any Portuguese and I didn't speak any English. So for me to walk around and to go around with people and listen to them and really didn't understand, it was extremely frustrating. Like,
Yeah, I can
the
imagine.
first few weeks, really frustrating, because it's not that I wanted to say something, but it was frustrating that I didn't understand what they're trying to tell me. And every time I needed to walk with someone, and if someone said something, I would just kind of look at it like, what are they trying to do? What are they trying to say? So you would get a dictionary and give it to them, but people don't have a lot of patience to the kind of things. So you're just like, oh, I don't understand. I don't understand. And then when the teachers send us something home to do, it was even more frustrating because you're like, I'm never gonna learn this language. I don't know anything. And I remember like my first ones were like, instead of saying why, I would say because. And in my class today, I had some students say because in Portuguese you say the same thing, porque. So in Portuguese it's exactly the same word, but in English two different words, because and why. And I would just play around with those things and see because, and then someone would say something I didn't understand. So it's about, eventually becomes a point where you just have to imitate what people were saying, and you really have to try. You just got to say, okay, I'm going to say wrong and I'm just going to try. You didn't have any other choice. So that's my way at the beginning of this language thing in the States.
Diego, first impressions, language and culture, coming to New York, upstate New York.
My brother tackled on a lot of good points there. And for him, I couldn't imagine. It must have been much harder because when you're young, you learn so much quicker than when you're older, right? I heard it said like this, that an older person learning a new language is like chipping into a rock words, but a young person learning a new language is like painting. It's a painting on a canvas. It's much smoother. It's a little bit easier, right? My first initial, I'll go back to stories, man. I remember the first day of school, and they present me in front of the class as if it was a movie. They present me in front of the class, and they say, "This is Diego." I didn't understand at the time, but I'm assuming this is Diego, and I did understand that they designated another child to be responsible for me if I need to go to the bathroom, and they would walk me to the bathroom themselves. A lot like Daniel said. Um, I Those are some of my first initial, and I remember all the teachers because he was on the high school building, Daniel, and I was in the little kid building, so we were separate. But every teacher, up until this day, I'm pretty sure every teacher in that whole school had an English Portuguese dictionary, and they still do. I can guarantee you that. But
Now,
going back to what Daniel was saying, we didn't learn, hey, this is how you put the grammar together, this is how the format works, this is how you use the past tense, the present tense, the continuous pronoun. We didn't learn it that way. We learned by having constant contact with the culture. And like he said, bathroom, okay, I understand that. I can make it. We learn through association, right? And I think that's the best way for English speaking learner to learn, is in that way, and I think that's how we did it. I think, and I tried to implement that in my class because I was also an English teacher for a while. To have them understand that you have to push through the hard times. So I was exposed to that, and it was much easier for me because I was younger, and I think I learned a little bit quicker. But it wasn't. It was tough, but I think the culture aspect of it, I think I struggled with that. I was a troublemaker. I was jumping around and doing things that, and for these upstate conservative Americans, it's like, what is this kid doing? And then you add the language in it that you can't communicate. He's a bad kid. So I was that kid, So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you guys. I want to give a little bit of a frame to what we're talking about right now, because some people watching this might be of a younger generation, and they're hearing us talk about every teacher had a dictionary, right, etc. Where now everybody is walking around with a supercomputer in their pocket, right? But we're talking about 20 plus years ago, where that sort of technology wasn't available basically across the board. And then second, you guys find yourself in rural America, and there's not a lot of uh, cultural exchange from the outside world in a place like that. And so you're dealing with people who only speak English, not really exposed to other languages, etc.
Can I
And
mention something to that? Can I mention something to that?
sure, go ahead.
I think that because of that isolation from the rest of the world, if we live in a metropolitan city where we're exposed to Spanish, English, different cultures and things like that, I think it would have taken longer for us to adapt to the culture and the language, because you wouldn't have to make as much effort. Because you know what, I have a Brazilian neighbor. I can speak to them. They can explain to me what the FedEx man wants, right? Instead
Sure.
of me having to be there and having to communicate and having to go through that struggle. Going through the struggle and going through those hard times is very important in the learning process. And you have to be patient and you have to face it on, man.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point, and it was part of what I was getting to, is that you guys found yourselves really without a choice immersed in English. You guys had total immersion for the language. And just to give a little more context, how many words or phrases do you think you knew in English by the time you entered school day one? Did you know 50 words? Did you know 20 words? Daniel's shaking his head. How many words do you think you knew the first day of school in the US?
Dude, I don't even think I knew 20 words, man. I really
Right.
don't think so. I mean, I don't even know if I could say bathroom maybe, or I don't think
And the
I
reason
do.
why I ask is because I'm trying to give whatever audience might view this a real concrete idea of the challenge you guys face, right?
Yeah.
Diego, how many words do you think you knew in English day one of school? 10, 20,
If
maybe,
it was
maybe
10,
not.
if it was 10, it was a lot.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So again, I think it's amazing because you guys basically sound like native speakers, right? And I'm trying to give people an idea of where you actually started from with English, right? So I want to segue towards we've you guys have already talked about school a lot, and I want to get your, because when I asked you for your impressions about the language and the culture, you guys both referenced school a lot, and school was on my list of things to ask you about because you guys learned English in the American education system in New York. And now some people might not know, but in the United States, educational policy is dictated by each state. There are 50 states, right? So it's not uniform in every state across the country. But, and I guess, talk about, I guess, the first year in school, right? Diego mentioned he had a student that was assigned to him as like a partner, someone to be responsible with him. And Daniel, you mentioned something like that. How was it going immediately into the public school system? You mentioned before that, Daniel, that education wasn't really a priority in your life in Brazil because of circumstance or culture or what have you. I'll let you explain. But how was it going straight into school no vocabulary in the language whatsoever, and no one there to help with translation. No one speaks Portuguese. How was that
Oh.
for you, Daniel?
So here's a catch, right? Um, we had 5 cousins, and one of them we're talking to right now, J5. That helped a lot because we were not kids who sat around, did nothing, who just complain, or we just like doing things. And they love doing things. So the first thing we did was pick up some baseball gloves, though we didn't even know what the hell that was. We went to the backyard and we played, right? We had no idea, just hit the ball and run if they say run. So that was like the key for us because we were able to interact with a lot of people our age and younger. And because we worked with younger, we got some very good vocabulary as well. But when you talk about the school public the system, it was difficult because they didn't know what to do. They had no idea what to do with 2 children that didn't speak any language. In my case, and also in Diego's case, we were older. If we were very little, it would be easier. But okay, we got a kid who's 13 years old. He's supposed to be in ninth grade, and everybody else is also in ninth grade. So what happens? What do we do? Like we hire a teacher who will speak Spanish, and that's what they did to teach us English. And that didn't work out because we didn't speak Spanish and we had some words, but that didn't work out at all. So what they did was they hired a teacher to test us to see where we were in terms of academically. So I took some tests academically, and they actually thought I had some psychological problems because my level of education was very low. And that's a key too. When you were exposed to a certain education, learning the structure of language, maybe it would be easier to go into a language. We didn't know what grammar was and anything like that. So when they test and they said, okay, this kid has got to start from the basics, but he's in ninth grade, I would stay in ninth grade for the first year. I would stay in ninth grade for the second year. Where everybody else moved up that were my age, I was a 14, 15-year-old kid still in ninth grade, right? And that really, really took a toll on me because I'm looking at all of my friends moving up and I'm still down. And they're like, oh, is he retarded? How come he didn't move up or whatever? But that's like social issues.
Sure.
So what they did was they took a test and they figured all this stuff out. And now my mother really pressured the school to say, listen, it's your responsibility. You should do something. So they hired a private teacher, a ESL teacher, they call it, English as a second language, who came into the school. They took me for a few hours, and I'm pretty sure they took Diego for other few hours. And we sat in rooms outside of what we were doing in the classroom. They will pull us out and say, okay, during English class, you come sit with me and let's really look at the basics, basic structure of a sentence, how to put things together, a lot of image connecting. So we would do that for a year before we can actually start looking at tests inside of the classroom. Can go deeper into it later in our conversation.
Sure. Diego, same question for you. Your very first impressions of the American education system in upstate New York.
I think when you're a kid, you don't think in those terms and those ideas. So like obviously you don't think like that. Like what I do remember being held back as well. For whatever reason, obvious but I think Daniel touched on all the points that I was about to touch on. But one of the things that he mentioned that really got me thinking was that um, we didn't come from like if we had 1 or 2 years of school before then, that would have been a lot. But we weren't academically, whether in Portuguese or English, at that level at all. So you're taking kids that the first time in their lives are going to school for the first time in their lives ever.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a language. I think it was more of a culture shock to understand the bells, the whistles, how things ran, the organization. I have to do this, I have to do that, like the orders. So I think that's what I remember most. I think I learned much quicker, like I said before, because of my age. But because of my age, I didn't understand much of
Well,
what was happening. You know what I mean? So I've been through the experience 2 times actually. I've been through the language experience 2 times where I learned English, and then I had to, when I went back to Brazil 10, 15 years later, I had to relearn Portuguese again. And that was a little bit more eye-opening for me, and more, I have more of a memory from that. But as a kid, the educational system, exactly what he said. We were pulled out of class. We had they really didn't know what to do with us. It
Well,
was kind of flaky. They tried their best.
well, no, this is really, I think, fascinating when it comes to the educational process, because the thing that's, I think, unique with you guys as students of English in the educational system is, like you guys were saying, you guys were not approaching, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to put words in your mouth. So if I say something that's wrong, just correct me. But it seems to me like your acquisition of the English language was not acquired through literacy in Portuguese, but actual contact with the language. Because I think a lot of students who maybe pay for ESL classes or go to public schools and this and that often approach learning a second language, English or any other language, at least partly through literacy in their first language, right? But I don't think that was something that you guys were able to lean on, at least not entirely, and especially because there wasn't a lot of resources for translation Portuguese or ESL in the American educational environment.
Can I
Go
add?
ahead, please.
I think that what is the first way that we introduce it to the language as a kid? It's not through opening up a book and reading, hey, this is the word, this is how you write. We don't learn writing until much later on, until 6, 7, 8 years old, later on in our lives. We first introduced to through language, through mimicking, through context, through understanding. This is a cup, right? And this is a cup, right? That's how you learn. You don't learn how to write the word cup, and you don't learn how to write, how do I write cup in a sentence? No, you learn through context. You learn through living it, and that's how we were exposed to English the first time. But we would have teachers and educators who were trying to do that, but at the same time putting structure to what we were doing, right? And I think for me, there was a clash there, because there was I don't think they really understood the cultural aspect of it, and how those outside forces were impacting us, right? Not their fault, but right. I think when we think about language and we think about learning the language, I think that's something that we need to be aware of.
Just to
100%. Well, go
just
ahead.
to complement to what Diego was saying, he said a key word there, structure, right? Language is a structure. And when you learn a language and you create this structure in your head to be able to make sense, whether it's reading or writing or speaking, there's a structure there. And we didn't have any structure for speaking or writing. We had a structure for reading, or for speaking, sorry. We had a structure for speaking because we spoke Portuguese. We can kind of simulate that. But when you're missing a structure, whether it's reading or writing, you don't have anything to fall back on. And I think that's a good thing when you're thinking about language, because every time that you go back to your original structure, your L1, they call a language one, you have a tendency to pull it back and say, I know where to find this information. I'm going to go to my L1 and I'm going to try to find something there, and then you translate. And what Diego was saying is we didn't have any structure for reading and writing. So when we came, though we were older, they prepared us from that very first sort of instruction. And when we look at Portuguese today, it is super difficult because we have to do the opposite. Where we didn't have it before, now we're looking at Portuguese and say, okay, what is the structure for Portuguese? How do we compare that to, what is the structure for Portuguese? And we always compare it to English, which in a sense is good and is bad, right? It's good and it's bad because it can really catch you. And I know Mr. J here can really tell us when we mix Portuguese, English, and Spanish structures, that gets your brain frying even worse, right? But structuring it for us was it was the key at that moment. And gladly we had a mother who spoke English with us constantly and really encouraged us to dive deeper into the language, not only understanding what we were saying, but also how to pronounce, how to go grinding to the minimum for
Yo,
us not to.
listen, pick up a book, go read. That was what we needed to do. Go read. Go pick up
Yeah,
a book.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Bored,
think you
bored.
guys bring up a really interesting point that I sometimes bring up myself, and I'm curious what you guys think about this statement. But I feel like written language and spoken language, even if it's both English or both Portuguese, is really two different languages. That's how I feel about it. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Uh,
In the
yeah.
language itself, there is a world viewpoint.
Hmm.
Like you said, like we talked about, there's a culture, there's a world viewpoint within the language itself. So you're battling that, and you're battling how to put sentences and structure together.
And that world viewpoint is something I'm going to touch on a little bit later before we close. Daniel mentioned something a little bit earlier, and I'm going to ask this question first to Diego because he's been agreeing a lot with Daniel. So I'm going to give Daniel a chance to agree with Diego. But Daniel mentioned that having family around and peers in the same age actually seemed like it helped as much as it being in school at the same time. What effect did the overall social environment have in your acquisition of the English language? Friends, family, things outside of school.
Everything, everything, because you're exposed to it. You have no choice. These people do not speak Spanish. They do not speak Portuguese. None. I think maybe two or three people in the whole town. Very small. You have no choice. You have to be able to figure it out how to communicate through mimicking, through a book, or through, for example, if I don't know how to say a certain sentence, I have to figure out in my head how do I explain it in a different way. Does it make sense? So
Mm.
if I don't know what a bathroom is, how can I describe what a bathroom is? Oh, a bathroom is a place that you go to go shishi. Everybody knows. Like, I think it's universal. If you say shishi, people, oh yeah, shishi, right? So so in that you're using different vocabulary words, right? You're forced to use different vocabulary, and you have to do this mental exercise in your head over and over and over again until you understand, oh, the word to describe what I was saying is bathroom. Okay. So you're forced into that language because you have no choice. You have no choice. I mean,
But I think that's an excellent tool, and I've said this to my students before. If you don't know the word, explain it. You have the context of being physically present with someone, right? I need to go to the place Shishi. Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
okay. They figure it out, right?
yeah.
Daniel, you have anything to add to that? How did the social environment outside of school help with English acquisition? Help or hurt? What was the experience?
Big time, big time. I mean, if you're thinking about whatever you're going to do, you put yourself in a situation that you have to deal with a problem. Like my brother was saying, you have to deal with a problem and you have to figure out ways to get out of this problem the best way possible, communicating in a way that people can understand, but also try your best to be able to say it in different ways. And for us, luckily we had, I was put into music class, I was put into theater class. My mother said, "You're gonna do theater. What do you think?" I said, "It's better than staying home. I'm doing theater." And I was a soldier in the theater class, and I didn't have anything. I didn't say anything,
What
right?
kind
I
of
just
soldier? What kind of soldier?
They give you a part but no lines, huh?
They
no
gave him a
lines.
pot. What was the
And then
pot?
I
Stand in the
forgot. It was
background and look tough like a soldier.
Would
yeah,
you
there
like me
was
to?
a picture of that.
Would
Yeah.
you like me to remind
Um,
you?
Go ahead, say it. It's all right. I was a Nazi soldier in a play
Sound of
called
Music. The
Sound of Music.
Sound
So
of Music.
But I think that was so important because okay, I didn't have any parts, but I was there when they were saying their lines.
Hmm.
I was there when they repeated 100 times the same thing. I was there when they were when they were singing, when they were dancing. These are all language ideas, right? And more important, I was there the following year. So I liked it. I learned to like it. I learned to enjoy it. I learned to be part of a group that accepted me, even though I didn't know. The following year I had a smaller part. The following year I had a bigger part. until I had one of the main lines. And every year after that, even through college, I went through to theater. But then I did music as well, the same thing. They put me in a choral, in a choir, and I was in the background just moving my lips or making funny sounds. But I loved it. I loved be able to listen to this music, and I love to be able to read it and actually get to, wow, this is great. You know what I mean? You're just putting yourself to this idea of a language that, yeah, it's gonna be hard at first, but you start liking it, start picking up. And not to say about sports, like my brother Diego here, Jay played sports, and it's a way to interact with people that you don't have to all the time speak. Yeah, you don't have to all the time you sharing, but you listening and you catching on different phrases and ideas on what people are saying. That makes you even better out of it, right? And then you slowly start getting to it, making a lot of friends, and these friends understand that you don't speak that well, so they come with a different vocabulary when they talk to you, and eventually start growing out of it. Just as a side note, I know my brother's gonna remember this. Our mother used to work at night, and she used to leave us with a lady. And I remember this lady was with us for a few months as like a babysitter, yeah, at night. And one day she sat with us and she said, she's like talking about something we didn't really understand. She said, "What? You don't know the alphabet? Come here, I'm gonna teach you. A, B, C, D, E, F, G." And it was like magical how this lady who had no intentions of teaching us anything were able to, put that into our hearts, put this really caring, kind moment to us. And you're gonna find that along your trajectory. You find the right person who really cares, who really passionate about the language, and they will take time, they will explain better, they will value the language so much that they want to pass that to you. So sorry to extend, but I think it's important.
Can
No,
I just
not at
mention
all.
two things? Can I
Go
just
ahead,
mention
please.
two things? I'm gonna mention this thing. You were talking about teachers right now, right? I think we had amazing, caring teachers, dude. Really, really awesome teachers. And one of them was that babysitter. And I remember I used to drive her nuts because I used to watch The Lion King over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. But the teachers, man, we had amazing teachers, and they really cared. They really took their time. Like, that's what I got out of all that from the educational system. I think that's probably why, like, I work with education myself today, because of these amazing teachers and the impact, teachers and coaches, right? Teachers and coaches, the impact that they had on me. I didn't know it then, and I was probably a butthead and an a-hole, but now as an adult, I realized, man, like how awesome, how lucky I was to have those great teachers. The second thing I was going to mention, and then I'll turn it back over to you. When you learn a new language, it is a humbling experience. You have to understand that you don't know. This is a different culture. This is a different way of viewing things, and you have to accept that that cup is not a cup anymore. It is a couple. And that's it. Like, you can't, oh, how do I spell it? No. It's a couple. That's what it is. Like, you know what I mean? You have to accept that. And you really have to be humble about it. I think that's one of the things. You have to be humble about it. You have to be quiet. A lot of the times, you have to be quiet. You want to express yourself, but you can't. You pause because you don't know how to do it. So you have to listen a lot. You have to listen. You have to mimic. And you have to take people as they are. So, I mean, humility. You have to have humility. You have to be humble learning the language. And I had to do it 2 times with back-to-back languages, English and Portuguese. And like, I realized that later. I was like, ooh, man, if I wasn't the type of person that maybe that was a little arrogant, it would have been more of a struggle.
And one of the things that I'm hearing when I'm listening to you guys is, and it's in my mind, and this doesn't always happen this way in the classroom when people learn English, but you can't separate the language from the culture. And in this case, what I'm hearing from you guys is language acquisition was involved in a lot of different social activities, sports, family, theater, media consumption, but a lot of it was social activities. Not only were you learning language, but you were learning social context for the language, right? With theater groups, with sports teams, with family groups, with with schools and academic groups, etc. So it was not just about I go to the classroom, I learn English there, I go home and I do something else. It was in every aspect of your life,
Perfect.
to the point where you guys are native level speakers, right? And so there's two things I want to ask. Well, actually, there's a few things more I want to ask. Um, I'll start with this first. Uh, and I'll start with Diego first. Diego, what were, and it doesn't have to be the most, but when you think about learning English again, acquiring the language, and you mentioned it, and maybe this was the last point you brought up about being humble. What was or what were some of the biggest struggles in acquiring the language?
The vocabulary words. I'll give you a good story again.
Hmm.
Or Daniel's gonna laugh at this one. There used to be this restaurant called Circle E, and we used to go like every day, every Sunday after church. And I used to say yes for everything, even though I might not understand it. I just say yes, yes, yeah, yeah,
Jim
okay.
Carrey, yes man, right?
Yeah, I was the yes man, right? And the the waiter comes to get my order, and she asked me a question, and I said yes. And then my mom turns around, she's like, "Would you like an elephant for breakfast?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I want that." And everybody started laughing and things like that, and like everybody started laughing, having a giggle at it, and that was a good lesson that she taught me. She's like, "You can't say yes for everything. If you don't understand something, you have to say it." And then it becomes on the speaker, the person that is talking to you, it becomes on them to have to explain to you. And if you still don't understand, you still communicate, "I don't understand." Using these phrases and these words, "I don't understand. Can you repeat it again, please?" Um, so, yeah, it's those. I hope that answers your question, man.
100%, and it's a powerful tool. I've made that same suggestion when teaching, is that sometimes it's just
It's the
powerful to say,
first thing
"Could
I
you
do.
please repeat that?"
Yep. It's the first thing I do when I go into a class when I used to be an English teacher is write those words down and make sure everybody understands because in my class, we're only going to speak English. I'm going to try to expose to you to the harshness of it right now. So we have to go through that tough those tough moments of the language right now. So when you're out there in the real world, it becomes much easier. You're able to say, "I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you." Things like that. So
Excellent.
that's huge.
Daniel, biggest struggles with the language?
Just want to touch up on what he said real quick because especially older students, when you go into a job or whenever you're around friends, you need to you need to reward some of your sayings. Your struggles becomes a little bit not so tense, right? To say, "I don't understand, I don't understand. Can you explain? I don't understand, I don't understand." You can use words like, "What do you mean? What do you mean by that?" It comes in such a way that people would have to explain in a different way. Then you catch on. Because every time you say, "I don't understand," especially for older students, it may feel like you are embarrassing yourself because you don't understand what is going on or because you don't have the knowledge. You have the knowledge. You always have knowledge. Knowledge is not language. Okay? Just because you don't know something, how to say something, doesn't mean that you don't know it. You just don't know how to say. You're not more or less intelligent than the other person. So finding the right words to say that might bring some ways like como assim? Huh? In Portuguese, we say como assim? I say, "Eu não entendi." No, mas como assim? We did that in Spanish. Pero como? ¿Puede explicar? No, no comprendo mucho. Huh? So it's just an idea there that you can go. Struggling
I,
for me, sorry,
I
struggling for me, reading and writing. Ooh, especially writing. I mean, getting those spellings, we got to think that there's the right terms that I can't figure out right now. But Latin languages are spoken languages that you read the way that you write. Portuguese is a little bit different, but Spanish is very much like that. You
yeah,
write
very
the
phonetic
way that
language.
phonetic, yeah. You write the way that you speak. Portuguese kind of is, but in English, no, it's
Yeah,
really not.
that's a whole different. That's a whole different. Yeah, but you're 100%
And
right.
I wish that when I was little, there was something called phonics, because phonics helps you understanding how you speak and how you write with phonemic
Believe it or
awareness.
not, I actually had phonics class where I went to school in upstate New York when I was in second grade. It didn't continue, but they used to teach it to some of the
Right.
elementary school aged children. I don't know if they had it in every single school system, but I had a phonics class for a while because
So yeah, there
English is a
was.
confusing language to read and write, even for native
Mhm,
English speakers.
sure. One of the things that I like to do was to imitate how people say things.
Mm.
Diego said he watched the movie The Lion King so many times. This is perfect language learning, right? Because you're looking at vocabulary, you're learning new vocabulary, you're learning how to say, you know how to pronounce, you identify different way to express the ideas in different ways. So that was really key for me. But when I took on Shakespeare in high school, ninth grade, man, it was hell. I used to like, I'm never gonna learn this. And you know, if my mother was here, she would say he complained a lot. My teachers would here be like, yeah, he did had a really tough time with this. But eventually, for me, I really felt comfortable when I went to college. When I went to college, those teachers really broke things down into such a lower level of English that made sense. And more important, when you teach it, it really comes together. You learn discovering new things even to this day. So important.
100%, and you kind of are have already segued into my next point because I mean I still learn things about English to this day. If you're reading, watching news, etc., sometimes I find new words and I have to look up the meaning, make sure I understand. But we just talked about struggles, and you got a little bit towards it, Daniel. But what were some of the turning points, or a major turning point for you in learning English, like light bulb moment or something like that? Do either one of you have one that you want to share?
Look, there is not like a turning point because they just gradually happen, but you feel comfortable at a certain point. And we
Mm.
are talking about this and this struggle that within 2, 3 months. It didn't take very long. Within 2 months, sh- I was I was beginning to say what I wanted to say. I felt comfortable going around and saying few things, right?
Sure.
And I mean,
Within
six
a few
months.
months of arriving to the US.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Speaking wise, right? Not reading and writing,
Sure.
but within like 2, 3 months, we I was in it very quickly, right? And I felt comfortable within 6 months, a year. You just like everything's fine, but at the same time, you start losing Portuguese because you're not using constantly. So,
Sure.
um, reading and writing and speaking. So.
Again, you guys, I think, have a unique situation where you were totally immersed into one language, and Diego's brought it up a couple of times how you had to re-immerse yourself into Portuguese to kind of relearn it, so to say. Diego, any turning points in learning English for you, or anything you can
I
comment
can't
on?
I can't really pinpoint to anything, man. I really it must have been much quicker for me because I was younger and I could learn. It's much easier to learn at the young age,
Hmm.
but pinpoint a moment or time or anything like that. Nah, I don't. I don't. I can't really think of anything right now.
Sure, no problem. Okay. I have and this has come up a couple of times. And this question is a very general question. What place do you feel translation or explanation of a second language? Shoot, I haven't even phrased the question. Let me try that again. All right, I speak English. I swear to God, it's my first language. What place does translation have in learning a second language? Right? So, like, you're learning a second language. You guys did it almost entirely through immersion, right? Very little help from Portuguese to English or English to Portuguese translation. What place do you feel translation has in the language acquisition process? Any second language. In this case, we're talking about English. Diego?
Well, this guy over here. I remember when I had to relearn Portuguese again. and I would always used to ask him how to say something. Can you translate for me?
There's videos on that.
You know what he would say to me? And it was the most frustrating thing in the world.
Hmm.
He's like, I don't know. I don't know. That's it. You figure it out. It was super frustrating. You're never gonna learn if I just keep translating to you. So, but he was right. I don't know if he was doing it intentionally. Were you doing it intentionally? With intentions?
Of course.
Or just
No,
being an
there's moments of frustration that you like gotta translate everything. Come on.
okay, I understand the frustration, yeah, but I, this is what I'm asking you is like, were your intentions that like the same way we learn the first language is probably the fastest and easiest way you're gonna learn? Because if I just translate for you, again, it goes back to the bathroom issue. If I just translate you for you, hey, yo, Dan, how do I say bathroom in Portuguese? And then he comes and he says, hey, banheiro. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, thanks. And then, hey, I want to go to banheiro, right? It'd be super easy. But is there any learning behind that? There isn't. So now I have to, again, going back to it again. Okay, you're not going to tell me how to say bathroom? I'm going to get mad. He's going to get mad. It's going to be frustrating. But the person that I'm talking to, I have to figure out a way to explain banheiro to them in Portuguese. Eu posso ir naquele lugar onde as pessoas fazem xixi? Eu preciso fazer cocô. Aonde? Aonde? Cocô. You know what I'm saying? So it was going through the same thing over and again. It was very frustrating. And imagine I'm older at this point in my life. We can talk about my second immersion to a language again later. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from you guys is
translation. So translation.
yeah,
I don't think so. Ultimately, you can use it, right? But ultimately, if you're immersed in the culture and you have to live it day by day, you know what I mean? The fastest way through that language is not through translation; it's through living it.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, that answers my question. It's funny again because the technology has changed so much in the last 20, 25 years that I even wonder if immersion is possible anymore the way you guys experienced acquiring a language, because you can bring your phone with you everywhere you go. You can go to another country and never speak the language pretty much, right?
Just put
In
up the
any
phone
case,
to the
it's
person, right? Just put up the phone to the person and say, "Hey."
yeah, exactly, right?
There's no
Or get it to
effort.
talk for you. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no effort.
Um, so I'm gonna start wrapping up here. I have let me start with the phrases first. Diego talked about something or mentioned something earlier about worldview and culture, and there's a couple. I have two phrases that I want to share with you guys. Two quotes from linguistic theory, and I had to look it up before the podcast tonight. I remember the quotes, but I didn't really know where it came from. The first one is, "Language is a lens through which we view the world." All right. This is attributed to the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. I won't go into it, but it comes from linguistic research. In any case, how do you feel about that quote? You don't have to agree with it, but language is a lens through which we view the world.
Or so let me tackle this one.
Okay.
When you are bilingual or trilingual, you really enjoy certain things of the language. Let's say that you're going to watch a movie, and this movie is translated. When you watch in your first language and you watch the translation, man, you miss out on so many things. And if you speak with translators, they will say, we just did our best. You're living someone else's point of view. You're not living yours. You're living someone else's idea, what they think could be best possible to translate those things. And that's really a shame that um, you have such a joy and pleasure when you catch on the language that people are trying to expose because they tell so much about them. and culturally you will get so much more. So and not just movies, right? When you're speaking with someone, if you are out to get a job and you are speaking English and your sounding and your pronunciations are well done, and if you using correct words at times, people really value that and say, wow, really? That's your second language? You did such a beautiful job. You really know your language. It's not about the speaking, it's about how much you work you put towards learning the language, not just learning for learning, but you want to be as close to native as possible. And then people value you to say he really took his time learning that. He didn't just learn however way, de qualquer jeito, huh? He learned in a way that he really finessed his diction, he finessed his vocabulary, he finessed his phrases and his grammatical terms. All of that plays a role on who you are as a person, right? And people come closer expressing their language to you because they see that you took a lot of time to learn the other person's language.
Diego, language is a lens through which we view the world. How do you feel about that statement?
Yeah, I have nothing to add to it. I mean, he took everything that I wanted to say. I really don't I agree. I agree with that. Um, Language is powerful. Articulation is powerful. How you say something, the way you say it, intonation. You know what I mean? And English is filled with that. Portuguese as well. And it's by learning a language. I think like second or third language. I think most human beings. You might know this statistic, Jake. The world itself, like what are the percentage of the world that speaks more than one language?
I'll have to look it up, but I think the majority, I think more than 50% of world citizenry speaks more than one language. It's actually in the minority people who speak only one language. I think I'm not 100% sure. Maybe somebody can look it up. I want to add something to this because we just talked about language being a lens and translation in its place. I'm going to share a little anecdote, and maybe you remember this from upstate New York, but it's funny. I don't look at language acquisition as an academic exercise, right? I mean, sometimes we do it in classrooms and it has similarities to a lot of academic processes, but I don't look at it as a strictly academic process. And what I mean is Daniel talked about what do you call it? How you're missing so much if you're watching a translation. And sometimes small children intuitively recognize things, right? So like, for example, culturally in the English language, you might say something to state a temporary state of being, right? I'm hungry. And your little 5 to 10-year-old friends are going to say, nice to meet you, hungry. My name's Daniel, right? Because the statement is ludicrous when you look at it from a linguistic perspective. I'm hungry. That is, you can intuit that is who I am. I am hungry. Whereas if you're speaking one of these other Latin languages like Portuguese, eu tenho fome, estou com fome. There's a separation from the state of being. You say, I have hunger. I am with hunger, right? In English, I'm hungry. What's your name? You know that's not what they mean, but it's funny. You can intuit these things. And so, like Daniel was saying, you do miss certain sentiments and ideas through translation, and the best translators actually translate ideas and don't translate word for word. In my opinion, you guys can disagree with me. Any thoughts on that?
Let me ask you, Mr. Honey Bunny. Let me ask you, what do you remember about us during that time of learning and acquiring a cultural, a new culture and a language?
I again struggling to remember, but it does seem like Daniel said within just a couple of months, there was no lack of confidence in expressing yourself. It doesn't mean the expression was always perfect from native speaking standards, but I don't feel like we had much problem communicating with each other. And there was a lot of social activity It wasn't like this social activity. We're sitting down and just talking to each other for over an hour. But back then, we used to include language was included in playing baseball in the backyard, playing football, playing basketball, taking canoes out on the river, going swimming, uh, playing video games, whatever it
I think
was.
it's much easier with children as well, right? Because you're children.
Yeah,
You're
and I think that's got to do. I think you're right. I think there's more of a social acceptance.
adults, exactly. Adults judge. They have that preconceived notion. Oh my God, did you say this word in that way? That's not how you do it. And then because of our adult minds, we're like, oh man, we're kind of shy and timid. But when we're children, what happens? Like nobody's paying attention, nobody's correcting each other on their grammatical mistakes or their pronunciation. So that nurtures the growth of that individual, right?
I agree, and I've told many parents when it comes to this that I think it's best to put especially small children in a social setting like group classes to learn because it's much easier for them to joke and laugh about the mistakes they make, etc., than to try to relate to an authority figure like a teacher or a parent or something like that in the initial stages of learning a language because you have to let go of some of the shame associated, and that's difficult to do as an adult in the adult world if you're a working professional or whatever it might be. So I
And
agree with that
I think
statement.
at that stage, children have their own universal language, right? They can understand each other. A lot of words doesn't need to be said. We, the adults, we complicate things. We put many words from many different. We complicate things. So when you just throw the kid in there, like they're gonna figure out, like they'll be okay. And I think all of us have taught in international schools where we've seen this, and it's like it's so awesome to see the progress that happens throughout the year from a kid who comes into the class and doesn't know any English, according to us, from to the end of the year where he's fine.
One more quote I want to share with you guys, and it comes from the same hypothesis. And this one will go a little bit, I think, further. The quote is, "No two people in the world speak exactly the same language." How do you feel? Let's start with Diego this time because Daniel tackled the first quote first.
Okay.
Diego, how do you feel about that? No two people in the world speak exactly the same language.
Absolutely. We have our own ways, our own unique ways, our own rhythm, cadence, our own vocabulary words, and how we format, how we put them together, our own perspective on things. We don't see them eye to eye in the same way. We have many similarities between our cultures and things like that, but yeah, it's different for each individual.
Daniel, no two people in the world speak exactly the same language.
And I think that's a lot of the struggles for second language learners, where they try to say, oh, but I want to speak like you, or I want to speak this way or that way. There's no way. I mean, just think of accents, just think of cultural background. We're talking about English. English is spoken in many different countries. It's not an American language. It's just a language that most people nowadays speak, right? It used to be Latin. But choosing to speak correctly, it doesn't mean anything. Could be correctly for where, for who, right? If you go to New York, people have accent. Do they speak incorrect than someone that lives in Texas? Going to Australia, is it different from someone that lives in London? Going to, I don't know, Norway, or going to like certain countries that speak English all the time and they have their English as their second language. What is the correct way to deal with it, right? What you want to think about is that you want to be understood and you want to be able to value the language so people can understand that you're not just speaking for speaking. You can do that if you want, but if you really want to speak correctly, you find a way that makes it sound educated, right? There's a lot of language that we can talk about. I don't want to get into racial issues and things like that, but there's a lot of languages that people like, you're speaking street English. That's not good,
Sure.
right? So
Sure.
that's important.
100%. I like those perspectives. You know, is there a correct way of speaking? Everyone wants to learn the basics, right? But when it comes to individual expression, if you have learned the basics, all individual expression is basically art, right? How you speak is an art form. You can imitate someone else, but ultimately it's your own individual expression, and it's almost like fingerprints. It is individual, right? Um, but I like that, and I've made the comparison. You know, you mentioned street English. I've made the comparisons in different countries. I've asked students, hey, have you ever gone into the street and got street food from somebody? They said, yeah. I said, when you spoke with that person, was their grammar perfect? They said, no. I said, right. Did you understand them 100%? They said, yeah. Right. And this was the one thing I didn't talk about with you guys, and maybe it shows the amount of importance. Maybe it's a reflection of how important I think it is, because I didn't mention it at all. But how do you feel about grammar in this immersion process? And I'm not saying grammar is not important, but grammar is mostly important for taking tests, if we're going to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm gonna. This is a Jakey Wakey original, but I personally have at times referred to grammar as a culture's attempt to control language. It's a form of fascism, but that's what people want. In any case, how do you guys feel about grammar in the learning in the I very rarely called it learning. I didn't mean to. In the language acquisition process, how do you feel about grammar? I don't know,
Wanna
leave it
go?
at that.
Yeah. So I think there's a place for it. It depends on where you are in the language acquisition. Um, so older students generally want to see that format, and usually those older students are the ones that are not exposed to the English language and culture a lot. So they want to
Sure.
see it, how it's written, how la 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 la. But as we spoke about it before, and we all in agreement, the best way to learn is through constant contact with the language and culture. I would avoid grammar if you can replace that with that consistent exposure.
I
But
really like. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
so it all really depends. Like it really depends on what particular to that student and the situation that they're in. If you're talking about a student back in Brazil, where I used to teach English as well, and they're 35 years old and they're a basic level English, yeah, I could see how grammar could be useful for them, so they can see things out, they can map it out a little bit easier. And then once they have the basic grammar, like I was very good at teaching the basic grammar. Once they have the basic grammar, it's a go time. Like, you know what I mean? Hey, we're having a conversation right now. So that's when you introduce more of a one-on-one talk, and try your best to create that environment and that consistency in the language. But once they have, like, if they're older students and they're in that situations, once they have that, I feel like there's no problem in diving into the other things in the language, you know? So
I really like what you said before about how grammar seems to be more useful for people who have less contact with culture, where
right.
you guys had a lot of contact with culture and social activities, where you didn't have to have grammar explained. You were learning it every day by absorbing it, right? But for those people who might be learning English strictly in a classroom in a country far, far away from native English speakers, yeah, that makes sense how it could be more useful to map it out, like you said. Daniel, how do you feel about grammar in the language acquisition process?
There's two things there, right? Language is grammar is the foundation to a language. You can't just ignore it. You need to have some kind of structure to form phrases, verbs, nouns, adjectives. Those kind of things are foundation. Language, grammar, we picked it up from the first day we're learning. How do you put two words together? You need to use grammar. how do you speak? You need to use grammar. You need to figure out, you need to express yourself in a way that people understand, whether you're talking about the present, the past, the continuous past, whatever. You need to figure out how to do that. Now, the way you introduce grammar is the key point, because you don't want to focus on specifics of grammar until later years. And I'm talking this from personal experience. We only start introducing, I'm not talking about nouns and verbs and those things, but when we got later in the years, maybe when you are 11, 12 years old, some people go to 15 years old, but you start naming it. Why? Eventually you need to take a test. Okay, eventually you need to go for a job interview, and they might ask you, do you mean this in the past and the present? What do you mean by this? Can you explain that? This and that. For test purposes, I think it's really important, but nobody's going to come to the street and say, hey, can you tell me the past principle of this, blah, blah, blah. They're not going to do that. So it is important that when you're first learning language, you're not so restricted to grammar, but you need to be exposed to it. You need to know what words you're going to say in the past, in the present. Well, how is this word different than that word? If you put this one on front or this one in the back, how are you going to do that? It's easier than you just, okay, a noun comes for the verb comes to the, that makes it way more confusing. Brazilians love to learn verb to be. Why are you learning verb to be? He, she, it, they, it. No, put it into content, right?
Yeah.
Diego says this all the time. Form phrases. Keep forming phrases, sentences, and then put those sentences in different tenses. That's going to give you your grammar background. Don't get so worried. Don't get so carried on. And I tell all the educators this kind of thing, but schools still want to like, no, you got to learn this. No, you got to do that. Yeah, we're going to do it, but there's differently, right? We can teach it differently.
I sometimes
Jake, I think grammar is like it's like a arithmetic, right? It's like 1, 2, 3, ABC, right?
Sure.
Think about to yourself, how many people in the world do you know that is illiterate?
Right. A lot.
You know a lot of people. How many people do you know that is illiterate?
Oh, look, I can share a quick story. It's on topic of what you're asking.
Right, but my point is like, there's not a lot in today's world. There's not a lot of illiterate people. Most
Sure,
people that are
literacy
involved in
rate
our lives,
is much higher.
right?
Yeah.
They know that. They know those things. They will eventually learn it. Like in my schools, like, oh, he's doing so bad with academics. Okay, it's important. I'm not saying it's not important, but they will pick up, they will understand 1, 2, 3, ABC. That's the foundation of everything. You'll get it. You know what I mean? What's more important is the other stuff. And we don't take, that's what Daniel was saying, we don't take it as serious,
I want to add one more thing and get your thoughts on it, your reactions to this. A lot of times when I teach grammar or talk about grammar with students, and again, like Daniel was saying, sometimes you can do more damage, you can do more harm than good when you try to explain things, right? I refer to grammar not as rules, but as patterns, right? And that doesn't mean you still don't need to learn patterns. For example, Lionel Messi can score a goal and Kylian Mbappe can score a goal. They might have slightly different methods of doing that, but they both learn the basic patterns of dribbling and running and getting to certain positions and kicking to score a goal, right? Scoring the goal is that communicative competence, right? You've achieved the goal. You've communicated your thoughts or your feelings. You've achieved understanding between yourself and another person, right? Now, of course, for certain things, we need to be grammatically precise, but you get to a point where we've all listened to pop music and different forms of music where people play with the words and play with the language. We know they know how to speak, but they're putting their own thoughts and feelings into the language and expressing it through their own experience, right? And so how do you feel about that statement that I made? Grammar is not as much rules as it is pattern.
Perfect. Find a pattern to the language, whether through music, arts, sports. You will deal with it much better. You'll feel more comfortable and you feel more secure.
Do you think
grammar.
Do you think it's valuable to learn grammar in the first language? Like, for example, I think it could be very difficult for second language learners to learn about the grammar in that language. Do you think it's helpful, like, for example, if a Brazilian's trying to learn English, to learn grammatical rules in Portuguese, or do you think it's more beneficial to teach it in English, teach the grammar rules, I just call them rules, grammar patterns in English?
Yeah, I mean, if you, that's the thing, right? Like we were just talking about, not having an education and coming to the States, and how much that was a bit easier for us because we didn't have a structural pattern. When you have a first language, you understand the language has patterns. And if you understand that and you're able to associate, okay, this is a pattern, you're able to ease into it. You're not going to figure out what the pattern, you understand there's a pattern there, and then you go deeper into it. On the other hand, languages can have certain mixture of patterns within the language. So that's okay too, right? But if you take Portuguese and English, there's a lot of patterns that are the same. You just got to find it. There's a lot of ending words that are the same. There's some pronunciation that is almost the same. So don't delete yourself from one language and immerse yourself into other, especially if you're an older student, because you're going to find some patterns within your own language that could make it easier for you. Again, depends on the person, right? Some people they don't like mixing two things. Some people learn better. I know Mr. J here really learns better when you're able to understand the pattern of the language.
Yeah. Diego?
I think what he's talking about, I think I'm going to repeat what he's saying. It's when you have, like, we had a blank canvas, right? Now, when you're learning a new language and you're learning the pattern, you don't have anything to lean back on. It's a blank canvas. It's easier to learn. Like, you just go there and you drop. But if you have this preconceived notion and these ideas in the bag that this is how it's structured, this is how it's done,
Yeah.
Then it's going to be much harder because you're like, oh, why is that like that? Because in my original language, that's not how we say it. And I'm like, well, my friend, I can't explain it to you. It's just the way it is. I don't know. And
it's a lens.
Another thing about grammar, most native speakers don't even know how to explain or understand grammar themselves. If I take a street guy right now and I say, hey, can you please explain to me what a present tense is?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
You know why I didn't know? I didn't know. And so I had to go back to the books and be like, man, well, how does the English language work? Let me see the patterns like he's talking about. Let me see the patterns. Let me understand it so I can teach it.
Yeah.
The best student is the best teacher.
Yeah, 100%. It all depends on if your goal is just to be communicative, you may not need to delve that deep into grammar, right? Because again, like Diego was saying, probably half of native speakers can't really explain grammar in their own language. I actually learned how to explain grammar better in my own language by learning other languages. I really realized now how little I knew about English grammar until I started learning other languages. In any case,
but you use it all the time.
Well, you never use it. You never.
No,
no one ever.
All the time.
Oh
you
yeah.
Grammar all the time.
Yeah.
You're not just out to yourself to say, "Let me explain this. Let me explain that." You're constantly using it, but you just learn how to use it, but you don't have to keep naming everything.
Well, it's almost you plug into the patterns. I can't explain all the physiology of how I'm breathing right now, but I'm doing it without even thinking about it. Yeah.
Jakey Wiki, I think you mentioned this before, is language is always changing.
It's a living thing. Language is absolutely a living thing.
Always evolving. And people morph it and make it into their own. And it's great.
Remember the Martin Lawrence movie where he went back in time and he was a knight, and like they were speaking English. He's like, I can't understand what anybody's saying.
Yep.
The language doesn't stay the same. Daniel talked about Shakespeare earlier in the episode, and it's like language is constantly changing. And if you ask students, hey, do you have grandparents? Yes. Do you speak your language exactly the same as your grandparents? No. Yes, because it's changing generation to generation. New technologies, new ideas are being encountered, and so the expression is changing. Look, wrapping it up, what final thoughts do you have to share about language acquisition, and any tips you have for people trying to learn another language, whether it be English or any other language?
As the Super Bowl halftime showstopper Kendrick Lamar says, oh my God, I lost my track of thought. I forgot what he said. Never mind. Yeah, I just think with language, when you're learning language, just be patient. Oh, this is what he says: be humble.
Ah, yes, 100%. Be humble. Daniel, Mr. Daniel.
That was quick.
Mr.
First thing, learning a new language is not easy. Don't think you're gonna come in and you're gonna get in your head. If you don't work hard, if you don't go through some frustrating moments, everybody does. Everybody does. It is very, very difficult, right? It could be fun depending on the teacher that you get. It could be fun depending on how much work you put into it and what kind of things that you go about learning it. But find your own ways. Some people learn through basic grammars. Some people learn through music. Some people learn through sports, like we did. Find your way to acquire vocabulary and use them. That is so important. And the final thoughts here is remember that you, as a bilingual student, have a lot of benefits. You improve your memory, first of all, when you learn a new language, new words, grammar structure, we talked about pronunciation, strengthen your memory core, the part of your head that is very important. You're enhancing problem solving. For us to be able to learn a new language and see different perspectives in solving different skills is proven. This is really, really important when you know a different language. Critical thinking, adaptability, that's really, really nice when you talk about going to different countries and learning new things, okay? You're also better at multitasking. You're able to do two things at once. You're better at switching from one side to another. You're more effectively thinking when you have two languages and you learn two or more languages. And you also increase your creativity, right? You expose yourself to different ideas and different expression in words that builds creativity within yourself, within your skills of doing music, arts, anything that sports enhance you as a person. So I think it is so important that you learn two languages. Try to catch on as early as possible, but understand that the later it goes, more frustrating it gets, but at the end results are great. So I'm glad I did. I think we went to a bit of a hard time doing it, but at the end, we're doing okay. Yeah.
Can I add to that, Jake?
Please.
Okay, so process. It's a process. Be patient. Be humble. It's a process. Last thing, if you are learning a new language, thank you, because you're making the world a better place. Ultimately, you're making the world. You've decided to understand the other, to get an attempt to understand the other. And much of the problems of the world today is the fact that we don't understand the other. We don't take the time to put ourselves in their shoes. We don't understand their language. We don't understand their culture. But the person that is going out there to try to understand a new language, a new culture, because that's ultimately what comes with the language, you know what I mean? Hopefully that in itself can be used for good and could dispel any ignorance that we might have towards a different culture, biases and ignorance that we have towards a different culture or a different type of people. So yeah, thank you. You're making the world a better place, dude. That's it.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks for your time tonight. That's where I think we'll wrap it up. That's all. Peace be with you. I'll see you guys next time.
Peace.
Later.